Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for coming back to Listening In, the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society podcast. In this series, we want to give you the opportunity to listen in to some of the conversations that we are lucky enough to have every day. That is, with a variety of people and organisations all working in the field of mental health and well-being. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to Claire Thompson, someone who is somehow able to have a wide and varied career and yet continues to engage in all aspects of it with real care and heart. Some of you may already know Claire through her role as Neurodiversity Ambassador for the NCPS, and as you'll come to hear, there's a reason that Claire is a passionate advocate for the neurodivergent community, and that is due to her own experience. As a mum to 3 neurodivergent children, her support for them resulted in her own personal discovery of difference and identity. Claire has also just completed a PhD at Ulster University, where through its famous murals, she explored the intergenerational impact of the conflict in Northern Ireland. This included looking at aspects such as socioeconomics, identity, tourism, and of course, trauma and PTSD. It's a fascinating subject, which we attempt to do some justice in our conversation. And on top of all that, Claire is a board member of the British Association of Art Therapists and also Ulster University's Neuro Network. At the heart of everything Claire does is a deep belief in affirmative support, creative expression, and valuing diverse ways of thinking, while ensuring that everything she does is deeply rooted in research. Is it busy?
It is a bit frantic. I've just been inundated recently with people just contacting me out of the blue to see if I'll do things. It's like, good, but you're like, oh.
You don't mean in a clinical context. You mean all the other stuff you do.
Oh, Belfast City Council, for example, contacted me to do kind of 2 sessions for them about entrepreneurship. And I was thinking, I don't really know about entrepreneurship. But then it was about starting a business. And I was thinking, oh, well, I suppose I have started a business. So, yeah, I could talk about that. But it's neurodivergence and business. And they are finding it difficult to kind of encourage neurodivergent entrepreneurs, so they were wondering why. So they thought if they got a neurodivergent person to come along and speak. So they're in the map.
That's fascinating, because I was going to say they must have got your details from, approached you for some reason, but obviously it's the neurodivergent slant on it that they're looking at. That's such a good segue though, Claire, isn't it? Because I know when you and I were sort of talking about recording this and trying to work out which aspect of your professional life do we focus on, because there are many. And we both decided in our equal, slightly neurospicy way, oh, let's just do it all. Let's see what comes out in the mix. So actually maybe, because the thing is, it's easy for me. I know you. But of course, people that are going to listen to this don't necessarily know who you are. They might have seen you speak at our conference or write things in our magazines. Obviously, people from Northern Ireland, from Belfast, where you are, will obviously know you as well. But is it a bit of a rotten question to ask you how you would describe yourself to anybody that doesn't know you? That's a rotter of a question, isn't it?
Ooh, it's quite funny because whenever I was doing training recently, I described myself as an absolute wing it person. I always feel like I'm absolutely winging it. It's kind of like autistic me likes to be really safe, but ADHD me just goes, just do it. ADHD me definitely whispers in my ear a lot more. So yeah, I suppose I'm not afraid to just go for things. So definitely a wing it person. Sorry, Faye.
No, not at all. So already you've told us that you are autistic, ADHD, so AUDHD, and that, again, you've already alluded to the fact when you talked about Belfast City Council that comes into your work a lot, into your work as a clinician, but also obviously into your personal life. Is there anything around that on a personal level that you can share with us about your own process, learning about that for yourself from your own perspective?
Yeah, I guess it would be, well, the start of my learning. I think I started way back whenever my children were quite young. And I started with like a childcare diploma. So it was child learning and development. And there were modules in it about autism. And it was almost like they were describing, I have 3 children, they were describing one of my sons. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So both my sons are autistic and ADHD. And my daughter's in the middle, not officially diagnosed, but she would quite openly say, yeah, I know I'm ADHD, but I don't need a diagnosis. So we're a very neurodivergent household. So I guess it wasn't until my youngest son got his diagnosis when he was in first year. And then, of course, his teachers were like, no, we don't see it. We don't see it at all. Because he is quite, as they say, social, like autistic people can't be social. And it wasn't until I went through the diagnostic process with him that I realized that I'd excused a lot, because I was kind of thinking, but no, I do that. That's
you
just
related so much.
Yeah. And then it was like a penny drop moment.
So how long ago would that have been?
Oh, goodness. I think maybe as far back as, because I know I was doing my talking therapy training at the time. And I think it might have been just before that. I'm thinking it might have been about 2011 or 2018. I don't know. I have those figures in my head. I can't remember which one. But yeah, as far back as then.
So we're talking, 10, 15 years ago or so. Yeah. And until that point, had you ever felt anything, questioned anything, or were you just Claire and that was it?
It's funny. I was talking to my youngest girlfriend recently, and I suppose we know a lot more now. But I was kind of saying, how did people not know? I remember as a kid, and I had 2 brothers, and I think my mum just labelled me a tomboy because I had 2 brothers. But I preferred their cars and their trains because I loved lining them up, and it was like, how did they not notice? I used to rebel a little bit, because I remember, oh goodness, I remember my mom, when this is giving away my age now, she would always buy me Cindy's, in the hope that I'd somehow play with like girl type toys. And I can remember I wanted an action man based solely on the fact that their eyes moved. So I skinheaded all of my Cindy's. And I remember hiding the hair because I thought, I'm going to get into so much trouble for this. And I kind of discovered, my mum had discovered the hair when she was hoovering my room and thought it was a mouse. And I just heard this almighty scream. But I used to get myself into trouble a lot from the kind of this rebelling. And then equally, in hindsight, it was like I chose clothes because they were comfortable, the stuff that you could move in. Hated tights, the school uniform at school. Oh my goodness, it was horrible. Trying to do a tie and that kind of thing. And then obviously back then, initially, my first child was diagnosed with dyspraxia. And back then, doing a little bit of research, I discovered that if your child had a diagnosis of something, that they didn't actually, go on and think there was anything else. It was a single diagnosis and that was it, away you go. But that didn't really explain all of him. So it was dyspraxia, known now as DCD, so more coordination, kind of balance and coordination type thing. And I would describe myself as that clumsy child. I can find the coffee table with my shin, I fall up the stairs if there's something to be kicked over or spilled. Yep, that will be me. So I think that does come with a lot of oh goodness. I suppose it's shame induced, and I'm going to use the word shame because you look at everybody else and think, how can they do it? Sit still, pay attention. And I would have been that daydreamer. I would have been sitting gone in another world, just gazing out the window, but learnt absolutely nothing. So I suppose I left school thinking school is just not for me. I'm not smart, that kind of thing, was always a doodler and used to get shouted at quite a lot for doodling. But doodling actually helped me stay present. It helped me focus. So even this perception of paying attention is different for everyone, and I suppose that's kind of why I like to advocate now. So things are different for young people coming through even the school system now, and there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, hearing you be able to reflect on yourself as a child. And those things that, like you say, you mentioned the word shame, and when you said that, I wondered, for you, do you think that then went on to, was there anything about confidence in that, do you think? If I think of myself in some of those things that you've described, I know I would have internalized that and then felt a lot less confident in myself and my abilities. Like you say, especially when we do that comparing thing with other people. Do you relate to that? Was confidence something that you think you struggled with?
Yeah. I would have been described, I suppose, as a really shy kid.
Really?
But, yeah, and then as a teen, of course, you get the other labels, the nice labels like aloof and standoffish and things like that. But I struggle in groups because I know I process information differently. So I kind of have to think about what someone has said, how they've said it, what it might mean, but equally what it might not mean, because I know that people don't communicate in a direct way like I do. So I usually have to try and work out what they're trying to say, and by the time I processed that, like person number 3 or 4 started speaking. So it just became easier for me to kind of stand back a bit, because it just felt too overwhelming to try and keep up. I know I preferred adult company, mainly because adults allow you that processing time, They'll speak and they'll stop and they'll listen and they'll pay attention. And then, of course, you develop that kind of you start to pick up, when you get really excited talking about something and you start to notice people's eyes glazing over, and you realize that they're a little bit bored and not as excited about what you're talking about. So that makes you scale back parts of you as well, which isn't great. So yeah, I did struggle massively as a teen, but then on top of that as well, I would call myself situationally non-speaking. When I'm in uncomfortable situations, my body will, when it comes to interoception, which is all of your internal kind of messages that go to your brain, when you're autistic, sometimes they are delayed, or sometimes they over-register and sometimes they under-register and sometimes they misregister. So if I have to speak in uncomfortable situations, my body literally registers that as a near-death experience. Yeah. So I automatically just breathe. My mouth dries up and I can't speak. I always have water. I don't know whether you notice. It's kind of my kryptonite. Well, it's my opposite of kryptonite. It kind of saves me from not being able to speak at all. And then sometimes, depending on how much peopling, I call it, that I have to do, it zaps my cognitive function, because my brain has to work really hard to kind of stay present for everything that's going on, and also try and not hear things that I don't need to hear, because my brain doesn't have an input filter. Yeah. So it can drain. So come the end of the day, sometimes I slur my words, sometimes I can't remember words. Sometimes I probably sound quite drunk. I know my mum, when I was a teen, used to say, "Have you been drinking?" And I honestly That happened later. But at the time, it was definitely not. So I used to be confused by that as well. You know, why do my words not work? And why does this happen to my mouth? And how can other people speak? And, you know, why does this not work? And why does that not work for me? So it did very much become a me thing. So kind of looking into everything and understanding the whys of things was massively helpful for me.
It's amazing. I know we started by me saying, of course, not everybody that listens to this is going to know who you are straight away, and they're going to get to know you through our conversation. And to hear you describing all of this, jumping right ahead to the here and now, you know, here I am speaking to a PhD researcher, you know, a university lecturer who has just sat only a few moments ago and told me that they didn't believe they were very clever when they were at school, and who's just been approached by the city council to go and do a talk for them. And you've just told me, you know, how overstimulated and overwhelming those social situations can be. So I just want to sort of step back and look at that bigger picture for people to a certain degree and say, you know, this is the person you're describing, then, and yet look where you are now. And I suppose perhaps that then leads to the question. So you've talked about learning more about all of this and about neurodivergence as you watched your children go through their own process and their diagnoses. Where's that bridge for you between the younger Claire that you've just described and the Claire that's sat in front of me now? I know you still experience those things. I don't mean to imply that you don't experience those same things, but where has the ability to do the things you do now, where has that come from? Is that coping mechanisms? Is that learning more and understanding more about yourself? How do those changes occur?
It's a bit of everything, to be honest. I mean, as a child, you don't have too much autonomy. You know, what you have to sit still, you have to pay attention, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do the other. I'm an adult. If I'm in an uncomfortable situation and my body's literally saying, get out, I can leave.
Yeah.
You know, so it's massively down to autonomy. For me, and even doing my my master's, it was a full day and it was quite overwhelming. So I have learned to balance what I call my people in. So if I do a full day of people in, the next day I don't plan anything. So even if I do a talk, I don't book anything in the next day. That's my recovery day, as it were, because I know that's how I burn out. So previously I probably would have done a little too much and then couldn't do anything for a very long period of time. So I manage that quite carefully now, which enables me to kind of delicately, I suppose, balance work life and what works for me and what doesn't work for me. So I suppose that's an around the way answer of how I get around it, really.
Yeah, you're finding those ways of managing and controlling your life, aren't you? Like you say, which is the privilege we have as an adult, hopefully a privilege we have as an adult. That's really interesting. So when you went through this you were witnessing your children going through this, you've talked about that recognition that what you're what you're seeing and hearing in them is yourself. What happened then, Claire? I mean, did you go and get your own diagnosis or?
I did. And I mean, I'm going to mention imposter syndrome, but even when I got it, it was a bit shell shocking because I still, right up until she actually gave me the report, I still kept thinking, no, you know, I knew, you know, on a lot of levels I was, but even then I thought this is just you looking for something. It's maybe not there, but it took me a while. I have to say I went through various stages of discovering I was autistic, and I definitely revisited a lot. under a different lens. But equally, eventually, it allowed me to kind of understand why things like the school system didn't work for me, like some peer relationships didn't work for me, why I felt so different. And it kind of allowed me to let a lot go. Because I wasn't, I guess, starting at the same starting point as everyone else. You know, I was already up that hill a little bit. So it allowed me to cut myself a little bit of slack, I suppose, and reduce the shame a little bit, because there was a lot of shame attached up until that point. But then I guess I went through a stage of just hyperfixating on everything autism after that. So I probably became this stereotypical autistic whose hyperfixation was all things autism. So then it kind of started to get asked to teach neurodiversity modules in university and things. And it was whenever I started to look into that, because I kind of put everything down to being autistic. And when I looked into ADHD then a little bit, it was like, oh, you know, the procrastination and the inability to kind of do things, and the you know, I used to joke that I was just a really bad cook, but I used to burn so many pots. You know, the ADHD part of my brain would put on like a pot of pasta and go up the stairs, and the next thing the smoke alarm would be going off, you know. So I burnt the backside out of so many pots. So it was things like that as well. And just even things like, you know, the autistic part of me wanting to be early for things, but ADHD me going, you've got half an hour, you know, go clean out your spoon drawer. And then before you know it, you're down to your pot drawer and you're going to be late for the next appointment, you know. But equally just like turning up in the wrong time and the wrong day for things, and getting really frustrated with yourself for essentially things that, you know, weren't really entirely in your control. So even finding ways that help the ADHD part of my brain, because I'm quite a visual person, so like, you know, visual coloured calendars and things is the only thing that works for me digitally, so I can drag them and move them somewhere else whenever I just can't face them. You know, it's not, because to-do lists did not work. I had some stuff on to-do lists about 3 years long, and it's like, I'm never going to do these. I used to scribble them out and rewrite. So I realized to-do lists were not for me. So I kind of like to keep things digital, and then I color scheme, and that way I don't double book myself. I can visually see where I am when. You know, I have one color for my private practice, I have a different color when I'm at university, and then I have a personal color. But more importantly, then I can see where my free times are as well, which is it's quite nice for me. So I need things visual. It's kind of how I process information.
It's really interesting hearing you describe that sort of tug of war between autistic Claire and ADHD Claire to a certain degree. As therapists, don't we? We talk about conflict a lot, you know, finding where that conflict is in somebody. And of course, that's very often, you know, belief systems and conditioning and trauma and all these things. But then to have this other, or these other components to that, which are simply about the way your brain works, and trying to honour each of those. It sounds exhausting and overwhelming in its own right. And that's just trying to regulate between these two ways and function accordingly. Is that, I sound like I'm telling you, I'm asking. I'm conscious it sounds like I'm literally telling you that, but I'm not. I'm asking, is that how it feels, or is
Not at all. Yes, absolutely. It does feel like, and I mean, for many years, I kind of thought, is this what, you know, what else can this be? Why do I, you know, because ADHD me has FOMO, you know, and autistic me would happily stay at home with my dogs all day, you know, and I used to be my own worst enemy by just saying yes to a lot and not having, you know, clear boundaries, and fear of missing out and trying to fit in, and, you know, all of those things. But now I'm probably like maybe a bit regimental with my boundaries, but I'm not afraid to say no now if it feels too much. And I will openly just say to people, I'm autistic, and because I used to get into trouble unwittingly in school. I didn't know why I got into trouble. Teachers used to say, "You're rolling your eyes at me," but it was only later on that I realized that's how I process information. Somebody asks me something, my eyes immediately go up to the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's like I used to get into trouble and not know how I was in trouble. And then, of course, I used to try and say, no, I wasn't. And then it was, don't speak back. And, so it was just, growing up was just so confusing, really confusing. I did feel like I had to be an alien. I had to be from another planet. I couldn't, why is everybody else doing this? Okay, why can't I do it? It's, there has to be something. It is difficult.
Okay, so I've got a million questions, as I'm sure you are not surprised, but I'm also really conscious of other aspects of you and your professional life that we want to talk about. So I'm going to attempt to do this very neat little segue, which is it's probably going to fail immensely. But okay, so thank you, first of all, because you've just beautifully outlined and very openly outlined your own experience of going through that process, and that's brought you to where you are now, finding ways to manage that more effectively. And obviously, we've alluded to the fact that obviously you work in as a therapist. You're an art therapist, again, for people that don't know, and a counsellor, as well as your work in education. So I suppose my next questions, and we'll come on to the research and the education side of it in a moment. But for now, just out of interest, Claire, so were you, I realise, I'm not sure even I know this, were you a therapist before you got your diagnosis, or was it the other way around? Or did it coincide? I don't know.
I got it before, but I didn't disclose.
I see. Okay.
So I don't think I disclosed until I did a level 4, and then I did a level 5 in counselling, and it was the third year of level 5 where I remember telling the tutor at the time, and she was really good. She just said, "Oh goodness, right, okay, let's make sure when we have exams you get a room by yourself." There wasn't an eyelid raised, and I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to, so it was great from that point of view. And I thought, oh, okay. But up until that point, I hadn't got into the habit of asking for accommodations, so I was still doing the whole thing, I can do this, I can try really hard, I can, and really I shouldn't have been afraid of asking for accommodations or telling people. So I think, when something like that happens and you think, oh, this is okay, it feels okay, yeah, I can do this again. So once you kind of mention it once and somebody's okay with it, it almost gives you I could try that again, But really, it should be the other way around. I feel like when you go into institutions and when you go into workplaces, that they should be openly asking people what support they need. And, I think it should be the other way around. And you shouldn't need to disclose anything unless you want to. But automatically, I think if we make I suppose schools, universities, further education colleges, workplaces, I think if we get the environments right, they're going to be great for everyone, not just neurodivergent people. I'm thinking even just like, when I go into a place and they have the horrible fluorescent lights, and I'm thinking, imagine like if a migraine sufferer even is here, if you get it right for one group of people, it's going to massively support, others as well. So it doesn't take massive change to kind of be able to support quite a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really lovely to hear that was the response you got when you did eventually disclose. And like say that is that confident word again, isn't it? That, oh, okay, well, I feel confident enough perhaps to disclose in another situation or to another person. Do you feel in your studies and then starting to embark on your career as a therapist, did your own awareness of neurodivergence for yourself and at that point obviously your children, other people, did it already start informing your work? Did it give you a lens through which to see, all of this counselling theory and practice that you were engaging in at this point? Did it already give you that perspective?
I guess even the training, any training I've done, it usually comes from a one size fits all training, and I appreciate that training facilities, they're trying to teach a lot of people, and I always knew what would and wouldn't work for me as a therapist, and I always knew, for example, and this is not a critique of CBT, but I always knew CBT was not for me. Okay. So I always knew that type of therapy was not something that I ever really wanted to deliver or do. And because how I process, mainly because of how I process information, which is visually, and equally when I can't find the words, I used to always doodle. I remember even as a child, do you remember the original scrapbooks that had all the different coloured?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
That's how I processed my day. And doodles and words and collage and, so I knew that was how I kind of made sense of things. So I always knew I was going to do something more down that line.
Do you mean creative? Sorry, Claire, are we talking creativity, a creative slant? Okay.
Creative, just a different way of processing things and putting words to things when you don't have the words, And I can remember the third year of the foundation degree I did, the lecturer was quite creative as well. And she used to bring in creative activities, and it was the third year of the foundation degree was psychotherapy. And a lot of people I spoke to hated psychotherapy and loved CBT, which just shows the diversity of the profession. But I knew I didn't like CBT. But psychotherapy, I was like, this is me. I love this. I love psychotherapy. I love the whole unconscious. I love kind of all of that stuff and working with I suppose, stuff that isn't quite cognitive and is permeating there. But equally, I love the fact that if you do work creatively, sometimes you don't even need to put words to it. You can process things in the company of someone else without ever having said a word as well. And I really love that. I think it's quite beautiful. And then equally as an autistic person, when we talk about the whole eye contact, I can look at someone when they're speaking, but when I'm speaking, to process my words, I can't look at people, so it's just when you're doing, then nobody has to really look at anybody either. Yeah. So it removes those barriers as well, which I quite like. So I was fairly determined to kind of discover something to bring the creativity into, adding on to my learnings as a counsellor as well, which is why I massively wanted to do the art psychotherapy training as well.
So I think what you're describing there, isn't it, is knowing yourself. You knew yourself and you had, we've got this smorgasbord, haven't we, of different therapeutic approaches. And you just instinctively, through knowing yourself, knew which of those approaches not only appealed to you, but really suited your way of thinking. And again, to use a well-trodden word within our profession, authenticity, your ability then to be authentic for yourself and by definition then with all the people you work with, who I know a lot is, you work a lot with children and young people, don't you? I'm right, aren't I? And I think, let's face it, if there's anybody that's going to spot us being inauthentic, it's our children and young people, isn't it? They'll sniff that a mile off, so... Yeah.
I love the honesty. I love the honesty from children. I love it. I do work with adults as well, but yeah, the majority of my caseload would be with children and young people. But then I suppose, because I'm also registered with a few insurance companies, and the adults come through that sometimes as well, as do the children. But I love the honesty, and equally then whenever, I am kind of contracting, it'll be, be honest with me,
Yeah.
and I'll, if I don't know what I'm doing wrong, I can't change it, So if there's anything that you don't like, please feel free to tell me. I won't be offended, that kind of thing, and just laying that out there from the start. I remember even down to the seating, it's kind of like, sort of going back to kind of counselling training and knowing what you wanted. I knew I didn't want a very clinical space either.
Mm-hmm.
So in my space I have one of those lovely lights, the ones that does the dancing coloured lights on the ceiling. So I have those, and I have bean bags, and we can sit on the floor if we need to, or we can, so I knew I didn't want something massively clinical. I wanted it to be comfortable, because I and there's blankets, and there's just fidget toys, and so it's just that, you need to be comfortable. You need to be feeling safe. You need to not have distractions. I remember even doing an exam whenever I did get a room, but they gave me an invigilator, and it was really hot. And she was drinking a 500-litre bottle of water. But whenever it has that little sports top and you suck it and the bottle goes in, oh my goodness. So I could not focus on doing my exam, because then I was just hyper fixated on the noise and watching this bottle then just go crackle back open again. And in the end, I had to say to the lady, I'm really sorry. I know it's hot in here, but could you please set your water outside the room? But so even from that point of view, I'm thinking I don't want distractions, so I have a clock even that doesn't make noise, it doesn't tick. It's like, because sometimes when you're overwhelmed, and I know my brain likes to attach to the loudest noise in the room, so if there's lots of noise at the same volume, that's kind of okay. But if there's one noise that is particularly louder or closer, then it's the only thing I can kind of think about, and it's almost like my brain goes, yep, there's a loud noise, that's what we have to attach to today, so I'm not hearing anything else. So I kind of was thinking about that when creating the space, I suppose, and I just needed it to be comfortable, not just for me, but for people coming in, not just for autistic or ADHD clients, but anyone coming in, slightly anxious or even when I was thinking about training about this whole concept of professional dress, even, and I was thinking, well, that's kind of, even that concept, because when you're thinking comfort and when you're thinking sensory comfort, that professional dress sometimes means different things to different people as well. And sometimes it's more about, as you say, knowing who you are, knowing what works for you, and just being kind of comfortable in what you're doing in every shape. So what you wear, how you are, what the room is. Because I can only be me. I can't be anyone else, So it's kind of like, as you say, it's kind of like people know, and kids know if it's something that's not real. And so yeah, I can only be me. So I've stopped trying to be somebody else a long time ago. So I just made it as safe a place as humanly possible based on my own preferences. I appreciate that everyone has different sensory profiles, and they fluctuate depending on where they're at in life, but everything can be altered or changed, so it's like, do you want those lights off? Do you want as we call it in Belfast, the big light on? Or is the big light is always the biggest light in the center of the ceiling. It's just commonly known as the big light, so do you want the big light on? So everyone's different, but everything can be changed or accommodated, and I kind of like that flexibility as well, that kind of collaborative approach.
When we finish recording, I'll tell you what me and my friends used to call the big light. But But that's not something to be made publicly aware, I don't think. I'll leave everybody to guess on that. And it's not something really outrageous, I have to say, but it's a little rude. Can I just come back, that honesty that you were talking about with children? I just want to say, I'm not saying anything none of us don't already know, but I'm just imagining being a child or young person coming to see somebody like you as a practitioner with this awareness and these considerations you're putting in place and that honesty that you're encouraging. And I'm just sat thinking, how many situations does a child have in their life when not only can they learn that they can be honest with an adult, but honest with absolutely no comeback or repercussions, honest in a completely non-transactional type way. Do you know what I mean? Because how many times might an adult say to a child, whether that's a parent or a teacher or whoever that might be, going, you can tell me. And then if a child says, well, actually, I ended up doing this today, and then be on the receiving end of someone, what did you do that for? You shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? But they've just been asked to tell that and felt safe doing so. And then it's come back and bitten them, hasn't it? So, yeah, just what a special thing to be able to provide to any child or young person. It's a rare thing for them to have in their lives, isn't it? That safe place to equally be themselves as much as you are there being yourself. So yeah, that's really lovely to hear. So okay, we're going to do a bit of a pivot here because time is against us, and I don't want us to finish this conversation without talking a little bit about the research that you've been doing for your PhD. Now, just to put this in context, we're recording this, early February. In early mid-March, we, as in the society, we are coming to Belfast, and we're putting on another event in Belfast that you're being kind enough to speak at. Now, I don't know when this podcast is going to come out. I think it may very well be around the same time as the event, actually. But again, I'm saying that because not everybody obviously lives in Northern Ireland, and not everybody is going to be lucky enough to attend that event and hear what you've been doing. So this is just a really lovely opportunity, perhaps, to give people some insight into this whole other area of your career and your work and your time and your energy. Let's face it, I know how much of that's gone into this. So is there any way, I know this is a really big ask, to, in a nutshell, Claire, help people understand not only what this research is that you've done, but how that then is rooted actually in mental health and therapeutic work, the work we are all doing on some level?
How do you start? I suppose for anyone not from Northern Ireland, I'd say you'd need to be under a rock to not know about the conflict here.
Yeah.
And just to, oh goodness, if I could put it in as short as humanly possible, it's rooted in the history of the 1921 partition, which was when it was decided they were going to separate Ireland into what is now known as the North and the South of Ireland. And then it kind of came to an end with the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. So the legacy isn't historical. It is still very much an active force that shapes the mental health here. And I suppose the civic engagement in terms of our post-conflict generation. I had, before I kind of looked at the research, I had heard this kind of mention of ceasefire babies, kind of that people banded about. So they called that anyone who was born after the ceasefire happened. But then I was thinking about the fact that, our mental health kind of where we are in comparison to even the rest of the UK is somewhat not really in a great position. And I was thinking about that in relation to particular areas in Northern Ireland, and we have a local research agency, which is the Northern Ireland Statistic and Research Agency, NISRA for short. So I was kind of wondering about areas and wondering about deprivation, and obviously because I'm a counsellor and an art psychotherapist, how can I link this into more of a community type project where we move things on? And for anybody, again, who doesn't know Northern Ireland, we have the phenomenon, yes, I said it correctly, sometimes I stumble over that, of murals here. So we would have conflict or political related murals here. And there's very different kind of opinions on the murals, but I was really interested in kind of their impact on the intergenerational kind of effect of trauma, really. And sometimes there's this separation that happens whenever we have, because we still have violence in Northern Ireland, and it's described as small pockets, I guess, but to me that feels like distancing, it's just those people over there. But equally then there was other research that came out recently that actually highlighted this as a form of child exploitation. So it's adults orchestrating rioting. And then there's more research that then links that to almost like recreating lived troubles experience, or lived conflict experience. So we kind of have this normalization of violence in particular areas of Northern Ireland. And it just becomes normal, it's perfectly normal for this to be organised. Young people technically are groomed into these situations, so I was quite interested in looking at it in a more kind of holistic way and looking at where the murals play a part in this as well, because the murals aren't everywhere, they're in particular areas. So looking at socioeconomic inequality in Northern Ireland, it's often geographically concentrated in what we would call interface areas. So we still have areas in Northern Ireland where predominantly Catholic and predominantly Protestant areas don't live, they live separately, but there would be what we still call peace lines. So we have walls and barriers between communities, very different, but, distinct communities. And obviously then what the walls do is create a blank canvas, so we do have murals, which has become really a massive tourist attraction as well. But equally sometimes that environment can create a sense of almost visual intimidation, and then that reinforces territorial boundaries but also social exclusion, so it doesn't get people mixing essentially with each other. So linking trauma, memory and identity, because a lot of these areas it's about holding on to your identity and what makes you, but equally sometimes what we know about trauma is that you go to where you feel safe, and it can be a trauma response. So sometimes these visual kind of representations of identity, and some of them are quite graphic, but they are legitimate, they are legitimate expressions of identity. And quite a lot of people have tried over the years to kind of almost just like make them go away without addressing the underlying reasons for them being there in the first place, So I was more interested in, why all of previous attempts to kind of work on this have failed, and why are these kind of images still here, and kind of wondering, is it strictly and directly connected to socioeconomic background, or is there something else at play? So basically that was kind of the overview. Sorry, I know you said quickly, I didn't.
Oh, it's fascinating, Claire. It's absolutely fascinating. Can I just clarify? This might sound a really stupid question, so I'll apologise in advance if it is. When you say make them go away? Do you mean that there have been active attempts to pretty much paint over the murals then? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes, there's been lots of incentives and lots of money and lots of funding.
I didn't realise.
Yeah. And even some that have changed. And then whenever violence kind of happens again, usually around the 12th of July, for anyone who's not from Northern Ireland, it's the celebration of the Battle of the Boyne here. Then between different communities, there's usually violence, rioting, that type of thing. And I mean, it's probably only in Northern Ireland where we would call rioting recreational. And it's children, it's young people, and they're being encouraged to go out and do this. And it's very much normalized. And obviously they're going to do it. There's a bit of a thrill in it, but it's the fact that this is normalized. And then what that does, that creates that tension, and that recreates lived conflict related experience, this sense that you need to defend your community, from the other community, and the implications of that, and why some communities have moved on and other communities haven't moved on. And I was really interested in the reasons for those. And then just kind of looking at the reasons why they are still there, because it does feel very much like, here's some money, go change them, but actually looking at the underlying reason for them being there in the first place.
I mean, it's a whole other conversation in itself, isn't it? And I know I've always been clear with you just how fascinating I find all this. I love hearing you, talk about everything from, you used the phrase earlier, small pockets of violence, as they call it, and now you use that word recreational rioting, and that, that's extraordinary for somebody like me that doesn't live there and hasn't lived through that experience or live in those communities. You're right, hearing those words that just sort of minimize it, slightly normalize it, but it also strikes me as this. It's a knotty problem, isn't it? It's that classic tangled ball of wool, because I do understand, or I think I'm trying to understand what you're saying, that these murals are there from whichever side, they are, as an expression of a history, and you say an identity, and of lived experience, and of beliefs, religious, political, whatever that might be. That's joy and trauma.
A lot of murals will be of people who have died as well, in various circumstances. So there's still a lot of trauma. But equally, then what it does is it's bringing the past into the present, and more,
Totally. That's sort of what I mean. That here it is, and I know you and I've talked to the past. Almost keeping people, is it contributing to people being stuck in this narrative? And yet then you get somebody coming along and saying, here we go, if we give you this, let's paint it over, let's clean this all up. And people go, but hang on a minute, this is us, this represents us, this represents our grief. You may as well, in a way, destroy, a family grave or tombstone. It must feel like that to them. And then you bring in the whole tourism aspect, where actually it's bringing people in, it's bringing money in, it's bringing, It's just mind-boggling, isn't it?
That's where class comes in, I think, because there's this sense of distancing yourself from it. And I think it's only in Northern Ireland where we separate murals from street art, whereas
Yeah.
anything painted on a wall would be a mural. So there is this, let's just, even calling it small pockets. There's just these small pockets, just over there. It's a little bit of recreational riding, but it's just like, let's not talk about it. Let's just ignore it. Let's just hope it goes away. So it's more about, for me, I think sometimes top-down initiatives are often structurally destined to fail because they treat murals as surface level aesthetic problems rather than I suppose complex responses to intergenerational trauma. So it's about engaging with that and engaging with communities, and even when they do bring in these interventions, then there's so many stipulations as to what can and can't come in, so it almost feels like what you have to produce is a watered down version of what you think should be there as well, so I don't know if there is an answer or if we're years away from answers, but it's just about recognizing the fact that not everybody might like them, on either side of the demographic, but they're there for a reason. And I think we have the longest ongoing mural history in the world, so they're not going anywhere either. So it's about recognizing that, but it's also about recognizing that we are still very much in a transitional phase from conflict. It's still very much a big part of who we are.
Isn't it so symbolic of such a lot of the work we do in our own practice as well, though? If we shrink it right down, that actually, like you say, sometimes there are no fixes, there are no solutions, and if they are, they may not happen when we're, sat with a client in therapy, but actually shining a light, bringing stuff into awareness and consciousness is as much part of that process as anything, and it sounds to me like that's exactly what this work that you've done is. That's exactly what this research is doing. It's not, like you say, these are not just surface level paintings on a wall. They represent so much more than that, and it's complex and it's important, and it feeds in to to the community consciousness, doesn't it? And subconscious. What fascinating work, Claire. And I know you're only just now at the end of this. If anybody is hoping for some little neat sort of ending to this, we don't have anything right now. You're in the process of putting this all together and your findings. But it's such an honour to hear you sharing that with us. It's funny, I know when we were talking about you presenting at the Belfast event this year, that you were kind enough to do the same for us. What was it, two years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, and you were like right in the middle of it at that point where it's just and now here you are, you've pretty much done and coming up with your findings. How wonderful for you to have seen that through. I can't imagine how hard going that's been, but I hope you're feeling I don't know. Wow. What are you feeling? What are you feeling now? It's come to an end.
It's been a love-hate. I loved the field work. I loved getting out into communities, chatting to people. I loved taking the photographs. I didn't mention was I photographed them in 360 because I think it was important for people to see them in context. So they're on a map of their geolocation, so they're mapped to exactly where they are as well, so people can kind of click in and have a look, but more importantly they can see within the community, they can see all around, and it highlights that we still have a long way to go, and for me it's about ensuring that communities kind of, I suppose, retain autonomy over their memory work, and their autistic processes. And I think if that is allowed to happen, transition will happen, naturally. But also it's not about erasing the past. It's about recognizing that it happened, and processing that in a different way. But I do have every faith that we will get there, but it's about recognizing these as different, recognizing that class divide, and recognizing, that it's just, let's not talk about it, small pockets, recreational rioting, it's really minimized. And then this normalization of essentially, inciting children to riot, basically. So it's about then, how do we shift that? How do we shift those narratives as well? So just kind of, there's a lot of people at the moment out there doing some brilliant work in this particular area as well. But you mentioned tourism, and tourism plays a massive part, because people do want to see the gory stuff as well, so tourism does play a massive, massive part. So I suppose, when you think about that, that is having an impact on content as well.
Claire, is any of this available publicly? Are there links? Are there resources? Okay, but it will be.
Yes, I do have a book chapter, but I'm not too sure at this moment. I know that I have to have the draft in for March. So there will be a book chapter, but it's more just a small piece on how might someone go into communities and work therapeutically with people to kind of, work on identity and community and things like that then, and process some of that. But the PhD, I think it goes through some sort of process, don't quote me on this one, and then eventually it's made public after that.
Okay. And the map you were talking about, that people would that be part of it too? Sorry, I might be asking you things that you've.
I mean, I have it. I can send you it if you want to see it. It's kind of there, and the app that I use for a 360, you have to be quite close to the camera. So I'm actually in every shot, but it's usually just the back of my head.
I love it.
Because it's like I'm still part of it, So it's like there's all these photographs of murals, and it's like, oh, there's the back of Claire's head. So yeah.
But where's Claire?
Yeah, I should have worn a stripy top, shouldn't I? But but I wanted to map them. So I used the top 20 areas of multiple deprivation in the Belfast Trust area. So I just wanted to see where they are and where the impact was. And they're quite highly concentrated along tourist trails as well. So that was kind of where the link to tourism came in as well, because tourism definitely plays a part,
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. Thank you so much. And thank you also for those, earlier part of our discussion where we're just talking about you as a person and your own life, your own lived experience, and how that's informed your work. We really appreciate, and actually everything you do for us, Claire, as our ambassador for all things neurodiversity, neurodivergence. It's such a pleasure to work alongside you. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to Claire for joining us today, and thank you for listening in. This podcast is brought to you by the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, a professional home for counsellors, psychotherapists, and over 120 wellbeing organisations across the UK. Autonomy, diversity, creativity and community are at the heart of what we do. We're creating a positive space for conversations with people who share common beliefs and goals, because together our voice is louder. If you would like to know more about the NCPS, please visit www.ncps.com for more information. And please remember to follow and subscribe to this podcast so you're always part of the conversation.